Something is sliding right now, high above Europe, and almost nobody is talking about what it means. In about 3 weeks, a stretch of heat will land on Spain, France, Italy, and Greece all at once. Not one hot day, but a locked dome of warmth that will not move. And the big weather models are already saying it out loud, before the calendar even flips. If you want the real picture of what Europe's sky is about to do, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. We follow the big weather agencies every week and translate their forecasts into plain English, so you do not have to guess what their charts actually mean. You do not want to be the last one in your group chat to figure this out. For most of Europe, August is the month people wait for all year. Schools close, factories slow down, and millions of people move toward the beaches of southern Spain, Italy, Greece, and the south of France. In a normal year, August brings hot afternoons, cool evenings, and the kind of slow, easy summer that families remember for a long time. Maps of temperature in August usually look like a smooth ramp, warmest in the south and cooler as you move north. The Mediterranean coast sits around 30 degrees Celsius during the day, which is about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. London and Paris sit around 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 68 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. Northern Germany and the Netherlands sit around 20 degrees Celsius, which is around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. But this summer, from the very start of May, the pattern has been different. Heat kept arriving earlier than expected, and it kept arriving stronger than expected. By late May, France's national weather agency, Météo France, blamed a heat dome for 40 degrees Celsius readings, which is about 104 degrees Fahrenheit, across parts of southern France. A heat dome, in simple words, is a great big cap of high pressure that sits on top of the air and pushes warm air down toward the ground. The air gets squeezed, the temperature climbs, and the whole cap stays in one place for days, or even weeks. By the end of June, the World Meteorological Organization, the weather agency of the United Nations, said a long, dangerous heat wave was covering most of Western and Central Europe. Cities from Lisbon to Bucharest broke long-standing temperature records. Spain reported more than 3,000 new temperature records in the month of June alone. Italy reported more than 2,700 new records in the same stretch. By the first week of August, the fires were already burning across Spain, France, and parts of Greece, and several national weather agencies had already been forced to issue their highest-level alerts. So what is actually happening now as we slide from the last days of July into the first days of August? Here is the part most people did not see coming. The heat is not going away, it is shifting. In early August, the heat dome is forecast to slide eastward, like a great lid moving across a pan of water on a stove. That means the worst of the heat moves from Spain and France toward Italy, the Balkans, and parts of Eastern Europe. At the same time, a fresh slice of hot, dry air is building over the Mediterranean again. The big weather agencies are saying it almost in unison, which is unusual because they do not always agree. Did you notice how often the word record has shown up in your news feed this summer? Drop a comment telling us the wildest heat moment you have felt so far in 2026, and keep watching because August has a few new surprises that we have not even talked about yet. The first big change scientists are watching is not in the air above us, it is in the sea. The Mediterranean Sea right now is much warmer than it should be for this time of year. The European Environment Agency said sea surface temperatures off southern France and western Italy were running about 6 degrees Celsius above the long-term average in some spots in late July. In normal summers, that number is at most 1 or 2 degrees above average for a few weeks at a time. 6 degrees above average is enormous. Think about your shower at home. If the water is normally warm but comfortable, and one day it suddenly runs almost hot enough to scald, you would notice right away. That is what is happening to the sea right now. Why does a warm sea matter for the air above it? Because a warmer sea pumps heat and moisture into the air above it, like a giant slow heater left on in a small room. That warmer, moisture air makes summer nights harder to cool down, and it also feeds stronger storms when cold air finally pushes in. Sofia Vergini, who runs a public weather forecast project called WFY24, told Euronews that the exceptionally warm Mediterranean is leaving a fingerprint on the land. She said the heat shows up most in the nights, not the afternoons. In plain words, August is going to be hard to sleep through. Heat that used to fade at sunset will keep hanging in the air until almost sunrise. That leads to the next big change, the one people will actually feel in their homes. Weather forecasts for the first days of August list several famous European cities that are not expected to drop below 20 degrees Celsius at night, not even for an hour. Athens, Barcelona, Rome, Naples, Valencia, Nice, Thessaloniki, and Split are all on that list. Forecasters call this a tropical night because in tropical climates, the air almost never cools off after dark. A tropical night is not just a fun label, it is a health warning. Your body cools itself down at night, especially when you sleep. When the air stays at or above 20 degrees Celsius all night long, your body never gets the break it needs, and heat stress slowly builds up inside you. For older people, for babies, for anyone who is sick, this can be the difference between a bad day and a trip to the hospital. This is one of the reasons emergency rooms in southern Europe fill up during heat waves. And because the Mediterranean Sea is so warm right now, tropical nights are stacking up night after night, not just once in a blue moon. What is the hottest night you have ever had to sleep through? Tell us in the comments, hit like if you can already feel what August is about to do, and we will keep tracking the new numbers as they come out every week. Here is the part that most people do not realize. The heat is not just arriving from one direction. It is being held in place by something far above us, called the jet stream. The jet stream is a fast river of wind high in the sky, blowing from west to east. Normally, that river helps push weather systems along, including heat waves, so a hot spell lasts a few days and then moves away. When the jet stream bends into a big loop, it can trap a heat dome underneath it, and the whole system sits still. That is what is happening over parts of Europe right now. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that these stuck or looping weather patterns have nearly tripled since the 1950s. In the 1950s, this kind of trapped heat was unusual. Now it is happening several times every summer in different parts of the world. Why does that matter for August? Because a heat dome that lasts 1 week is uncomfortable. A heat dome that lasts 3 weeks becomes dangerous. It dries out the soil, it shrinks the rivers, it kills crops, it fills hospitals, and it starts wildfires. And the longer-range computer models are now expecting that exact pattern of slow-moving heat for parts of Europe this August. In the background behind the jet stream sits a much bigger piece of the puzzle. The North Atlantic Ocean, especially the patch between the Caribbean and the British Isles, has been running above average for most of 2026. That warm patch feeds moisture into European air masses, and it also nudges the jet stream into slower, loopier patterns. 2 separate studies reported in 2026 argued that hot European summers may actually be predictable years in advance by watching this ocean warmth. In plain words, scientists can already see the fingerprints of a hot summer in the North Atlantic long before the summer arrives. This summer is one of the clearest cases so far. Right now, sea surface temperatures are running well above average across much of the eastern North Atlantic, which is the ocean between Europe and North America. That warm patch is one of the reasons forecasters sound so confident about August this year. In simple words, the warning signs have been building in the ocean for months. August is the month when that warm patch finally has its biggest effect on the air above Europe. That is why the big agencies are sounding the alarm so loudly. The next piece of the puzzle sits far away from Europe in the Pacific Ocean, near the equator. The United States Climate Prediction Center, a part of NOAA, officially said El Niño conditions are now underway and strengthening. El Niño, in plain words, is a natural warming of part of the Pacific Ocean that changes weather patterns around the world. Their most recent advisory said there is a 97% chance that El Niño will persist at least into early spring of 2027. The latest weekly reading of the key Pacific region, called the Niño 3.4 area, shows the water there is about 1 2/10 degrees Celsius above average. Forecasters put the chance of a very strong El Niño in the same league as the biggest historical event since 1950 at 81% for October through December of 2026. A strong El Niño tends to push the jet stream into bigger, slower loops. Bigger loops mean more chances for heat domes to lock in over Europe, especially in late summer and autumn. So when you hear about August heat in Europe and El Niño in the Pacific at the same time, those two stories are connected, even though they are happening thousands of miles apart. At this point, do you think Europe's summer is becoming the new normal, or one strange year we will look back on as unusual? Tell us your honest take in the comments, and please hit subscribe if this breakdown is helping you make sense of what the headlines actually mean. Now let's zoom into one country the headlines keep mentioning, the United Kingdom. For most of the summer, the UK has stayed a little cooler than the continent, with rain and cloud rolling through more often. That is about to change in August. The UK Met Office released its long-range forecast for the month. It said temperatures will probably be above normal in most parts of the country. It said some spells of hot weather and heat waves are possible, especially in the south. It also said highs near 35 degrees Celsius, which is about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, are expected in August as the heat intensifies. For a country used to summers around 20 or 22 degrees Celsius, that is a big jump. But here is the surprise twist most people missed. The UK Met Office also noted that July was the driest July on record in many parts of the country. Soils in southern England are already cracked. Rivers in parts of England are running low. Reservoirs are lower than they should be in late summer. So when the heat arrives in August, the UK will not just have a heat wave, it will have a heat wave on top of drought. That combination is what dries out landscapes and starts wildfires, including the kinds of fires the UK does not usually see. Meanwhile, on the European continent, August is set up to be brutal in a different way. The European Centre for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts, usually called the ECMWF, runs one of the world's most trusted weather models, based in Reading, England. Their seasonal outlook for August says warmer than average temperatures are likely across almost all of Europe. The strongest signal sits over the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe. That includes Italy, Greece, the Balkans, and the inland parts of Spain. For these regions, the outlook is not a vague maybe. It is a strong leaning toward another month of well above average heat. Italy's Department of Civil Protection has warned that inland cities like Florence, Bologna, and Rome could peak well above 40 degrees Celsius, which is over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, during the worst stretch of August. Greece's National Observatory says Athens and surrounding areas could see sustained highs near 42 degrees Celsius, around 108 degrees Fahrenheit, before any sea breeze arrives. The Copernicus Climate Change Service, a climate program run by the European Union and based at the ECMWF, noted that wetter-than-average conditions are possible in some northern areas. But in the regions where the heat dome is set to sit, the dominant story is heat and dryness. That mismatch, dry and hot in the south, wet and mild in the north, is one of the fingerprints of a shifting climate. This is the part of the story that feels most urgent right now. The summer of 2026 is not just hot, it is dry. A report from the World Weather Attribution Group, a network of scientists who study extreme weather, said the European summer of 2026 has so far been characterized by exceptional heat and widespread dryness. In a Guardian analysis published in late July, scientists said the climate crisis is sucking soils dry across the continent. Crop losses in southern Europe were already being measured in millions of tons because of the heat and drought combined. In France, wildfires forced hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate from areas near Bordeaux in late July and early August. In Spain, fires have raged through parts of the country for weeks. NASA's Earth Observatory published satellite pictures showing large burn scars across southern Europe, the dark patches of land where whole forests have burned. The Spanish and Portuguese fire services have been stretched to their limit. The Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service tracked smoke plumes drifting across the continent all the way toward Central Europe. This matters because dry land and dry air do not just hold heat, they burn. And August is the worst month for that, because the land has already had 2 full months of heat with very little rain. The fires in France alone this summer have reached a scale the country has not seen in modern records. According to French officials, more than 115,000 hectares of land have burned across France in 2026, more than in any other year on record. For comparison, 1 hectare is a square about 100 meters on a side, roughly the size of a city block in a European downtown. Multiply that by 115,000, and you can picture a strip of scorched forest stretching across the country. The single biggest blaze, the Gironde fire in the southwest, burned about 420 square kilometers of pine forest, an area about 4 times the size of Paris. More than 220,000 people were forced to leave their homes at some point during the crisis. France's interior minister called it the largest peacetime evacuation in the country's history. The smoke from these fires has reached cities hundreds of kilometers away, turning midday skies orange and pushing air quality readings into the worst category. These are not background numbers. These are the kinds of scenes that reshape how a country plans for August from now on. Wildlife is taking a quiet hit that rarely makes the front page. Foresters in the Gironde region have reported mass die-offs of young pine seedlings, the same trees firefighters are trying to save, because the soil moisture dropped below survival levels before any flame even reached them. Marine biologists tracking Mediterranean fish say several species, including sea bream and sardines, are migrating north into cooler water off the Atlantic coast of France, leaving fishing communities less certain about where the next catch will come from. Beekeepers in central Spain have lost whole hives because flowers wilted under heat before the bees could finish a single pollination cycle. These are not headline stories, but taken together, they are the slow part of the story that lasts longer than any one heat wave. Across the Pyrenees, Spain's fire season has been just as relentless. Firefighters in the Iberian Peninsula have reported an unusually early start to the high fire danger period, with burned area already running far above the 10-year average. Smoke plumes from these blazes have been picked up by satellites well out into the Bay of Biscay and across the Alps. The European Environment Agency has warned that fire danger is forecast to stay at very high levels through August in Portugal, Spain, southern France, Italy, and the Western Balkans. This is why the dry spell is not just a summer news story. It is stretched into the heart of the holiday season, at a time when hundreds of thousands of tourists are moving through the very regions the fires have been burning. Here is another piece of the story hiding in plain sight. Europe's mountains are paying a quiet but lasting price. Across the Alps and the Pyrenees, glaciers have been retreating for decades, but this summer is accelerating the loss. Research groups tracking snowline and ice mass in the Alps have reported some of the highest bare ice areas on record for early August, meaning winter snow melted off far earlier than normal. When glaciers lose mass, they do not come back in one good winter. It takes many cold winters back to back. A single hot August can erase decades of small gains. Hiking trails in the high Alps are being closed because of rockfall risk, as the permafrost that holds mountain walls together thaws and loosens the rock. Streams that used to run cold from melting ice now run warmer, and downstream farmers who depend on those cold mountain streams for irrigation during summer are already noticing the change. Here is another piece of the story hiding in plain sight, the kind that shows up in your wallet before it shows up in the headline. Europe's rivers are running low, and low rivers cause problems nobody sees until they hit their tap or wallet. The Rhine, which is one of the busiest commercial rivers in the world, hit record low levels at the famous Kaub gauge in mid-July 2026, around 40 centimeters, and by the final days of July, the gauge tied the previous all-time low of about 25 centimeters. That level makes it nearly impossible for large barges to pass. The Po River in northern Italy, which feeds farms, factories, and drinking water for millions of people, has also dropped far below its normal summer level. The Danube, running through Central and Eastern Europe, has shown the same pattern in some stretches. When river levels drop, three big things break at once. First, cargo barges carry less, so the price of fuel, fertilizer, food, and building material climbs because the goods move by truck or rail instead, and those cost more. Second, many of Europe's power plants sit beside rivers, so they can use river water for cooling. If the river is too warm or too shallow, the plant has to slow down or shut off, and that shows up on the grid. France, which relies heavily on nuclear power, has been especially exposed during past heat waves because warm river water cannot cool reactors as efficiently. Third, drinking water reservoirs tied to those same rivers run low, and farmers face limits on irrigation right when their crops need water most. A warm August on top of dry riverbeds is therefore not just uncomfortable, it is operationally fragile. Then there is the energy story, which becomes its own kind of crisis when the heat stays. A recent Reuters report noted that in parts of Europe, summer electricity prices are now matching the winter peaks that used to be the most expensive part of the year. The reason is air conditioning. Households and offices that used to get away with a fan now keep air conditioning running around the clock. The European Union's own data shows that energy use for cooling in homes roughly doubled between 2018 and 2024. Italy leads the continent in total cooling demand. Spain, France, and Greece are not far behind. Energy analysts at a group called Ember said the June 2026 heatwave pushed daily electricity demand to summer highs in several large economies, sometimes within a few percent of all-time records. That sounds technical, but it has a real feel at home. When demand spikes, prices spike. When prices spike, bills climb. And many older apartment buildings across southern Europe were built long before central air conditioning was normal, so adding cooling to them strains both the wiring and the power plants feeding them at the same time. On hot August nights, when entire apartment blocks switch on their air conditioning at the same time just before people go to bed, the grid takes its biggest hit of the entire day. And this brings us to the part that matters most for any human body in the path of this heat, the public health side. Scientists use the phrase excess deaths to count how many more people die during a heat wave than would normally die in the same period. For Europe's 2003 heat wave, the most studied and most tragic reference point, more than 70,000 excess deaths were eventually confirmed across the continent, with around 15,000 of those in France alone during the worst August stretch. That event became the wake-up call for national heat action plans in country after country. For 2022, another brutal European summer, the World Weather Attribution Group and a study published in Nature Medicine estimated that more than 60,000 people across Europe died as a result of extreme heat in that single year. Far less discussed, but equally important, are the days lost to heat-related illness by working-age adults, especially people who labor outdoors in construction, agriculture, delivery, and street work. For the 2026 heat waves so far, data collected across European countries and reported by Reuters estimated roughly 10,000 excess deaths tied to the late June heat wave alone. The World Weather Attribution Team concluded that the late June heat wave would have been virtually impossible 50 years ago. A similar heat wave in 1976, they said, would have been about 3.5 degrees Celsius cooler than the one Europeans just lived through. That gap, 3.5 degrees, is the part most people do not understand. It is not just a warmer summer, it is the difference between a hot day that ends with a cold drink and a hot day that ends in a hospital bed. Insurance and emergency response are quietly absorbing the shock as well. European reinsurance groups have signaled that 2026 is on track to be one of the costliest natural disaster years of the decade, with wildfires and heat-driven crop failures driving payouts well above the 10-year average. Several national civil protection agencies, including Italy's and Spain's, have already drawn down funds set aside for emergencies by the middle of summer, much earlier than in past years. In Portugal, the government extended the official high fire danger period by several weeks because the risk profile simply will not fade as it used to. These responses are quietly admitting that what used to be a bad year now arrives more often and earlier. That is why more European cities are opening public cooling centers, extending library hours, and putting water stations in parks. These are not symbolic gestures. They are small admissions that the climate a city was designed for is no longer the climate the city has. Europe has now had repeated summers that look like this one. The blistering summer of 2022 brought more than 60,000 heat-related deaths and shattered hundreds of temperature records. The 2023 summer smashed that record again in many regions. The 2024 and 2025 summers stayed hot, especially over the Mediterranean, even as the headlines moved on. Each of those summers stacked heat stress on cities, soils, and people that had not yet fully recovered from the year before. So when experts say August 2026 looks like it will continue that trend, they are not predicting a freak event. They are predicting the next chapter of a familiar story. This is one reason many European governments have started to treat extreme heat the same way they treat storms, with named heat waves, advance warnings, and specific advice for vulnerable groups. Some readers will be planning trips this August. Here is what the forecasts and the local warnings are quietly telling you in plain words. Treat August 2026 across Spain, Italy, Greece, southern France, and the Balkans as a serious health event, not just a hotter-than-usual holiday. Plan outdoor sightseeing for the early morning or after sunset, not the middle of the day. Carry water like you would carry your wallet. Pick hotels or rentals with real air conditioning, not the kind that hums faintly and does nothing. Keep in mind that even when the daytime high is 32 degrees Celsius, the night may not drop below 24 degrees Celsius, so your body never fully recovers. If you have older family members traveling with you, treat the first 2 tropical nights in a row as the moment to check on them by phone and ask how they feel. The countries that did best during past heat waves were the ones that treated heat the same way they treat storms, with public warnings, cooling centers, and the rule that nobody, especially the elderly, sits alone all day without a check-in from a neighbor. And the food on your plate has a story too, even if you live thousands of kilometers from a Spanish olive grove. Spain grows a large share of the world's olive oil, and official Spanish Ministry of Agriculture data mentioned by The Guardian projects that the country's 2026 to 2027 cereal crop will come in around 18.5 million tons, a drop from the previous year of about 24 million tons, driven almost entirely by the heat and the dry soils. Spain's olive oil production is also running tens of thousands of tons below forecasts. Wine grape growers in southern France, in Tuscany, in Castilla-La Mancha, and in parts of Greece are reporting earlier harvests, lower yields, and a noticeable shift in grape sugar levels because the vines ripen under stress. Italy's olive regions, especially in the south, are reporting similar stories. Durum wheat, the backbone of pasta, is down in several regions. Tomato paste, the base of so many sauces, is shrinking in southern Italy and Spain because the fruit scorches on the plant during peak afternoon heat. When the crop falls and the heat keeps the presses running at lower volumes, supply tightens and prices rise. If you have noticed pasta, oil, wine, or tomato prices creeping up at the store lately, the fields of Spain and Italy are part of the reason. Everything we have walked through so far should change how an ordinary person reads the next weather headline they see. A tropical night is not just a colorful phrase, but a warning label for vulnerable people. A record dry July is not just a garden problem, but a national infrastructure warning. A stationary heat dome is not just a strange shape on a map, but the reason the same region has been burning for weeks. And above normal temperatures in a seasonal forecast is no longer a small nudge. It is the slow turning of a dial toward a new climate baseline, the kind Europe lived through in 2022 and 2023 as well. The June 2026 monthly average for European land came in at 19 and 14/100 degrees Celsius, the second highest June on record, sitting about 1 and 78/100 degrees Celsius above the 1991 to 2020 reference period. Western Europe in particular recorded its hottest June on record in 2026, with temperatures running up to 9 degrees Celsius above seasonal norms in parts of France and Germany, the kind of gap that should never be a normal summer surprise. That single sentence describes a continent, not a city, and it is a reminder that one heat wave is now news, but the rising average is the real headline underneath the headline. Forecasters do not have a perfect picture of August, and that is worth saying clearly. August 2026 is still being shaped in the sky. A passing cold front could break the dome over Spain before mid-month, which would push the worst heat toward Eastern Europe instead. The exact timing of high fire weather days, the final track of the jet stream, and how quickly soils give up their remaining moisture will all change the day-to-day picture. Seasonal models are also least reliable in areas where small shifts in the jet stream can flip the whole pattern, which means the UK, France, and Germany should watch the daily forecast more than the seasonal one. What the major agencies do agree on is the broader shape. A warmer than average August, with the strongest heat signal over the Mediterranean and southeastern Europe, with more dry than wet days in southern countries. That confidence is not certainty, and we will keep watching it, because if the picture changes, the story changes too. If you have made it this far, you clearly care about what is really happening with our weather, and so do we. Tap subscribe and turn on notifications so the next breakdown lands in your feed the moment the data changes. Drop a single word in the comments, hot, dry, both, or mixed, to tell us which half of August 2026 is shaping up the worst in your corner of Europe. Send this video to the one person in your life who swears every summer is the same, because this one really is not. We will be back next week with the new model runs, the new temperature records, and the new fire reports, all translated into the language we actually speak. Thank you for staying with us until the very end, and we will see you in the next one.